Happy Diane. Get out from under you. Happy birthday, Diane.
Thank you, thank you. Carol, I get extra credit for showing up early on my birthday.
There's a card.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, Charles Jeffreys bought one of the first lots in Randol Mill Park Estates. And he knows a lot about the history of Arlington. And the thing that I'm most excited about, which it doesn't have anything to do with the park, but it probably does, is that he has trained 100 Boy Scouts to become Eagle Scouts. And that is a fantastic accomplishment. And he's going to talk to us today. Is that okay, honey? Is that okay, doggy?
She, she hasn't seen, I was wondering what she would do when she saw dogs out here.
Oh,
She's kind
okay.
of, she's kind of skittish in certain
Okay.
things.
If a helicopter flies over, you might pause for a moment because it gets pretty loud.
All right, ready?
Ready?
All right. I'm used to always talking for an hour
Oh, no.
because I'm a tour guide when I can make some money. But we're going to try to make it interesting and informative from that standpoint. I just want to point out to you that our wonderful person who sent out the newsletter had something that I want to make sure that we, together, if you saw the picture of the Indian village on there,
Oh, yes, that's from the newsletter?
yes.
Yeah.
Are you aware that where we're located, and the Caddo Indians, which was basically the biggest group of Indians in this area, those were not teepees, those are wiki-yups. They took poles, put them in the ground, bent them over, put it back in the ground, they did loops of that, and put thatch over it. Our Indians here in the Arlington area never had teepees. Only the Plains Indians, like the Comanches up in the Midwest, all the way up. Comanches went all the way to Wyoming and all the way down to Mexico, but they were what we typically see as Indians with the teepees that open with the poles in the top. I thought it was interesting from that standpoint. That was correct for Arlington. What I'm getting at is to digress before I tell you what. Let's ask somebody: is there any one person in here can name the 9 alphabet streets of Randol Mill Park Estates?
Of course. Everyone can do that.
Can you name them all?
A is harbor, B is bay, C is candle, E, elm, G is garden, H is heather, I is iron, and that's not mine.
D.
Oh, fair meadow, I forgot fair.
D.
Deer, there you go. Is that
Deer
mine?
path.
Is that it?
All right. Okay.
See, we all know.
See, but now, who knows the name of this street right here? This street actually has a name according to the city of Arlington. This from the parking lot around to where it goes to Randol Mill Park Road.
Randol Mill Park Road.
That's through the middle of the park.
Yeah.
But this little street right here has a name. I'm going to tell you something I didn't know until recently. It's Village Green Court. According to the city of Arlington, that has a name. So,
How about the creek? Does it have a name?
you know, we call it No Name Creek,
Okay.
and I think that pretty much, from that standpoint, you can say. All right. When Archibald Franklin Leonard, there'll be a test at the end of this, and a significant contingent of the Foster families came to Texas in 18 1845 as part of the Peters Colony. Does anyone who know history know about the Peters Colony? Peters Colony was set up by a group of 10 businessmen in the United States and 10 businessmen in England out of Philadelphia that wanted to basically make money selling land, and they knew that Texas had been opened up and they were trying to get settlers here. And so the Peters Colony, as it was called, signed an agreement with the Republic of Texas, Sam Houston, that they would get 200 people to move in what we call North Texas, basically from a Red River, 60 miles south and 22 miles across was a section of land that was given to the Peters Colony, with the understanding is if they got 200 families to settle there within a 3-year period of time, the state of Texas would give them 4 sections of prime land. They didn't designate what that was, wherever they basically chose. And so the Peters Colony came up with trying to get people, especially out of Kentucky, Missouri, to come to Texas. And in doing so, one of the groups, as I mentioned, was this group of the Foster family, which was a large one, including Mr. Archibald Leonard, who came to the part of the Peters Colony, which we now call Grapevine. And this grant in 1841 by the Republic of Texas made these people the opportunity, if they stayed there 2 years, you could claim 320 acres for yourself, and the Peters Colony would sell you the other 320 acres. Well, long story of this, but basically the Peters Colony tried for about 7 years to make this program work, and they never did. They never did get 200 families in here, for whatever that means. Now there was other settlements. Of course, remember, there was the settlement down here of Webb, south of us from that standpoint. There was the Watsonville, basically at I-30 and 360. The cemeteries there, that right over there in that area was Watsonville, and that was a thriving area. The settlement of Arlington dates back to 1840. After the May 24th, 1841, I'm reading this a little bit so I can make sure I get these dates right in case you're taking notes. General Edward Tarrant, for which Tarrant County's named, and a Captain Denton, pay attention now, here's where the interesting thing is, who was from that place up north called Denton County, and what it's named for, came down to try to run the Indians out of Arlington. The Native American, primarily Caddos, something we call Village Creek. Y'all figured out why it's called Village Creek. The Indian village, which went from basically Division Street and Green Oaks south on Village Creek, which is now the bottomland of Lake Arlington. There was one time estimated over 10,000 Indians living in that area. But right here at Division and Green Oaks, there was counted, according to the general, 1,000 warriors that they fought, plus the kids, plus the wives and what have you. So there was 3,000 to 5,000 people from that standpoint. And General Tarrant tried to run them off. Well, they didn't. In fact, Captain Denton was killed. And if you look at your markers down here at the end of Lamar, where it runs into Green Oaks, you'll see a plaque there. That's where Captain Denton was buried. He was the first of the leader of the U.S. Forces to lose his life in Texas. So, one of the distinctions. 2 years later, the general came back with a whole lot more soldiers, came to Village Creek along what we now call Lake Arlington, and all the Indians were gone.
Where'd they go?
Well, the story is they didn't research that, but some researchers, I happen to know a man who was a lawyer for the Indian community, and he says they went north, basically up about Gainesville from that standpoint, and they went there, and of course eventually the Indian Territory into Oklahoma. But the Caddo Indians that were so prevalent, and their ancestors, because if you go to the University of Texas at Arlington Library, you will see that there's some artifacts from the village down here that wasn't 200 years old, but more than 2,000 years old. So we have a history of the Native Americans living in Arlington in a very early time. Y'all have all heard about the train that went down into the thing covered up by the silt. Now, one of these days we'll do that. Arlington has some interesting things about it. When Archibald Leonard moved down from Grapevine to Birdville, okay, Birdville was an area, basically we'd call it just west of Euless. There was a community that got started, in fact the first public schools in this whole area. Kids that wanted a formal education in what we would call Arlington had to walk 5 miles to go to school. Some of us wouldn't walk that far. Well, Mr. Leonard became a postmaster, a county commissioner, a variety of things, and he also decided that he was going to operate, because there was not a full mill, a grist mill as they called it, in this area. There was a cotton gin down in the community of Webb, but everything else was either Fort Worth west or Dallas to the east. And so Mr. Leonard decided in 1856 to build a mill down here on I'll pass this around. Here's what the picture of the mill looked like, if you're interested. But someone asked, where is the site of, someone asked, was the mill somewhere in the park? Well, the mill was down there on the Trinity River. It was down there about 100 yards west of Precinct Line Bridge as we now know it. There is a plaque down there. It's on private land. You told a little bit of story. I've been told not to bother the people there. They don't want you on their land. As you turn and go along there, you see the new bridge that goes over, but here's an example of the older bridge that went over Precinct Line. Originally that was a crossing point. But I'll pass this along. Where the red arrow is, here's the traffic circle down here, if you know it, down here in the very bottom land. And you go north, across, up to Trinity. Just over there is the site of the mill. So in 1856, the mill was built by Archibald Leonard. First he built the dam, and then he built the hydro plant. What was unique about this plant was not only did it do grain milling or grist milling, it also had a cotton gin and also had a circular saw where people could bring trees that they had fallen, cut down and cut them into lumber. So it became a community that people came, that's told by historians, of 60 to 70 miles, people came to the mill, to Mr. Leonard's mill, and they would often do this on, since they didn't have money, they'd do it on percentages. So they'd bring all their grain in, and he would mill it for a portion of it, or the cotton, or the lumber, or what have you. And since people were there for 2 or 3 days, they built houses. and people stayed there. It became enough that there was workers there, so they built houses for the workers. It became a voting place, a community center. So Randol's apostrophe S mill was quite a community. How does that get to Arlington and Randall Mill Road? Okay, the road from First Street in downtown Fort Worth, if you follow it out, turns into Randall Mill. It was the way that people in Fort Worth, remember there was Burris Mills over there, would come out Randall Mill to Randall's Mill, grist mill, and the people from east all the way into Dallas would take this road that was 1 mile south of downtown Arlington, or Division Street as we call it, and come along here, come down the hill, over the hill. Most of you made hopefully the back way by the apartments and over I-30 and down by Lowe's, and as it goes around and around, down by the horse pastures down there. So that was the road to Randall's Mill. So in doing so, it became known in the community of Arlington as the way to get to the mill. And so people came from a variety of areas around here to get to Randall Mill Road so they could follow this one road to the mill, be it in Fort Worth or be it in Arlington. So in many respects, two things that really kind of started the Metroplex, or the center part of what we now call North Texas, was Bird's Fort, as I said, which was only around for a couple of years, which was up there in Callaway Lake. If you know Veridian, if you don't, it's hard to see it from that standpoint. What Veridian calls Bird's Fort Trail or whatever doesn't actually go to Bird's Fort. The only way you can really truly see Bird's Fort is one of two ways. Is one, you can go down to some houses, go around their back alley, around their houses, and come out and look over Callaway Lake and see it. Or the other way, if you've got a strong four-wheel drive vehicle, is to start in Main Street in South Euless, come due south, and you'll go through some streets, and then no streets, and then bare land, and it still is today. Veridian has not built it, and you keep on going down there, and you will get to Lake Callaway, or Callaway's Lake. And that's where Bird's Fort was, and the first white settlement in North Texas was Bird's Fort, but the first major settlement in terms of commerce was Randall Mill's place from that standpoint. Well, how did it get the Randall Mill from Archibald Leonard? Well, in 1867, a man by the name of J. Wheeler and his partner, Mr. Albertson, bought the mill, and they operated it for 10 years. Then a man named Bob Randol, or R.A. Randol, came from Winchester, Virginia, and acquired Wheeler's Mill. Bob Randol operated the mill until his death in 1922. So it was quite something, part of our economy here for a long time. As I said, people came from all over the North Texas area to have their crop processed there. So the die was cast, if you want to say, is people referred to this as Randall Mill Road, and all this territory was to Randall's Mill. Of course, remember, over the hill, and once you go down, it was prone to flood as far as the Trinity was concerned. How did we get what we got here? Well, in 1953, Arlington purchased this 150 acres. The idea was to put in a golf course. And the city proposed in a bond election 2 years after that, in 1954, to build a golf course, and this bond fund to fund the development of the golf course. The bond election went down by 2 votes. So the city of Arlington, in its frustration, decided that they'd turn it into a park. At that time, the parks were kind of what we call neighborhood parks, but here was land that really wasn't set like the city would normally build their parks. If you go around and see most of the Arlington parks are kind of flat land and don't have this topography and our no-name creek and everything down here. But this was the community center. This was the place where Arlington met. I have somewhere in here the script from Channel 5 TV covering the 4th of July celebration at Randol Mill Park. Fireworks were here, concerts were here. It was a major event on a regular basis in Randol Mill Park. People from all over Arlington considered this their park and therefore came here on the weekend. People even camped here. The scouts came here and even had jamborees here with scouts all over Arlington. So it was a major hub of that area. Now, since it was on Randol Mill Road, people referred to it as Randol Mill Park. The die was cast from that standpoint. The property, where you look at that fence and those trees right there, was a barbed wire fence that ran straight across from Randol Mill all the way north, and that was still left property from the original owners. Over there by that big oak tree, and when I say over there, the White House on the corner at Candlewood and Oakwood, where we live, the big oak tree was part of the shade for the corral for some horses. How this gets to be our Jeffrey story is my wife and I got married with some couple of we were friends with. We came to Randol Mill Park to play tennis. And we would come over here to the fence and look over and wave at the horses, whatever, from that standpoint. We had an idea for a plan of what we wanted to build a house. And so we started looking around for lots. We went over to the Oaks and what have you. And over at the
What year was it?
1970.
1970.
Yeah, 70 is when they first, when I'm talking about this, was then they decided they were going to develop this, and the developer was going to build townhouses all along this property next to the park. Well, the city of Arlington didn't like that idea. And as I understand it, through much discussion or cussing or whatever, they ended up putting the townhomes on the far north end and turning these streets into what they call upscale homes. The original plots of land here required they be all brick structures. They have wood shingle roofs. There were several things that put them above the average so-called house. In doing so, the city of Arlington, because the Parks Department decided that for approval, they had to give up this little circle or cutout of the land to the city to add to the park, to add to the, whatever you want to say, to the movement of the growth of the park. The developer started selling lots up on what we call Harbor Crest, and therefore it was,
Not selling lots.
yeah, no, originally the original developer sold lots to the builders. And so that started the development of Randol Mill Park Estate. If you remember 1970, 71, 73 in there, does anyone know their history? What was going on?
Building the homes here.
Huh?
2010 Garden Oaks, we built the homes there 1975.
Right.
Right there.
They built them from 72 to 76, the houses in here.
75 we built the house.
Right. We moved into ours in October of 73.
Wow.
Yeah, we bought the lot in 70. That's another story. So in 1970, there was a recession started. And some of you may remember in 1973 what also happened.
With the Jimmy Carter?
Vietnam.
Huh?
Vietnam or Watergate.
Well, no, it's the oil embargo when we couldn't get gas, you know.
Is it on fire over there?
My dad's cooking
Oh.
at my house.
So anyway, the economy has cooled off. So the developer decided to sell off the remaining lots, and not the ones that some of us had bought or some of the builders had built in here. For example, on our street of Candlewood, of the 10 lots there, 8 of the lots were sold to builders or individuals. Some of the other streets, they were almost all sold to people called American Homes out of Grand Prairie. An American Home came out there and built 2 model homes on Bay Oaks, the one across the street from each other on the corner, were their 2 model homes. And then they also had inside that living room of the big house, someone knows with the bay window, they had all their little models and layouts of the homes that you could build in here. And American Homes had show homes. You chose which one you want. What was remaining, you go out there and they would build it on there, and you paid them for the home. I didn't want to do that. We wanted our own house built. So I went over to American Homes and said, I want to buy a lot. And they said, we don't sell lots. We build houses. You tell us where you want and we'll do that. And I said, no, we've got our own plans and our own builders. We don't want that. And they said, no, we won't do that. So over the next few months, I called them, went over there, bugged them, and they finally said, okay, what do you want? I said, I want the house on the curve, on Candlewood with the big oak tree. We're back to the oak tree and the horse that we saw way before. Okay. After much negotiation, they agreed at a premium to sell us that lot. So we bought that lot and then didn't build on it for about 2 years. At that time, houses were starting to go build up in this area. And so therefore, we have a story that Randol Mill, meaning Randol's Mill, developed this whole area because it was the way that people went back and forth. It was also one of the ways you went back and forth to Fort Worth if you didn't take the toll road. So it was the bottom land down there, and then where you mentioned the Harrison, where the burials are and everything like that, that section of Meadowbrook was the other way you could get to Fort Worth. That was, you either took the tollway division or you took one of the 2 bottomland streets. So the long of this story is Randol Mill, as it was called. Why it was never stayed at Wheeler's Mill, I don't know, but that's another story. We have a story that we're in here in an area that's been an important part of Arlington history and development forever from that standpoint. There's not any other section of Arlington other than what's called the entertainment district, the industrial park. Remember, that's the old Triple D ranch when they used to have the horse racing up on Division Street before 360. And so the Triple D ranch, then the Ditto Ranch or property in here, with the southern part of that being held by the Vandergrift family, and then property that we're on. So basically, you had 4 families that control what we'd call North Arlington. And we are part of the area that had the most development other than the Six Flags, but as far as private development, this was the area. It made the high desirability from that standpoint.
but we did have, the fireworks were right here for Arlington. And we'd come over and see them and everything, and it was when our son was real little, and so one night we decided, well, we've been out long enough, and we went back, and there was someone parked in our driveway, so we didn't get in. And we said, could you please move? And they said, we were here first. And we said, we live here.
The guy didn't believe us until I told him, if you move, I will drive in and go in the house. And then he seemed to buy off on it.
Yeah, when we moved here in 1975, in November of 75, in 76, it was still 4th of July,
Yes.
and all of our houses got blocked in. The people parked in front of our driveways, and,
Yes.
and then they had
Oh, they said when the fireworks were at its heyday in there, yeah, you're right. I mean, people parked for miles around here to walk to the park. You know, the park was just full of people.
and that was when they moved everything into the center of Arlington.
What it is.
Yeah.
And then the people would come and they would play loud music. And they would, the young people would drive their cars and squeal so their tires would make a big noise. And that's when we petitioned, and they put bumps all along the road over here to prevent them from speeding. But another thing I was gonna say, yes, when all these houses were built, they all had wood roofs, wood
Yes.
shingle roofs. There's not a single house
And they had to be
now.
100% masonry too, you know. And when they redid that and were composition and they were 80% brick, you know, they made several changes from that standpoint. But in the first days, there was very exclusive home. Why we have some 2-story homes, and we have, I guess the biggest house that's in this area, if you ask me, my wife and I will tell you, when we moved in for our evening entertainment, we would walk through all these houses being built. I guess it's the 3rd house on Arborcrest facing south is the biggest house in Randall Mill Park Estate.
How big is that?
That's
The
not,
same
that's
building,
Donna's
the
house.
same, that building.
That's about 4,000 feet, right? They said it's like 3,900 feet.
No.
We're the,
No
we're the
house that
4th
big
house,
right here.
but Eric Erickson from Dallas built that house, my house, we moved in 73, and the house behind me, which is not 2-story, our 2 houses are. But he came from Dallas and built, and then decided he couldn't keep workers going back and forth between Dallas and Arlington. We moved in, it was new in 73.
Okay, so how many different builders would you say are in these 9 streets?
There was Dwayne Leeds, Smith and Smith, and American Homes, and then Fairmeadow had a separate builder.
We had a separate builder.
But that's the only house he built, he was a friend.
Yeah, he was a friend. I don't know, I would say probably a dozen different builders. Yes,
What about St. Clair Woods?
that was there beforehand, okay? This
That's the
land
older
here,
one.
That was in the 60s then. Those
Right.
houses-
well, it was in it started, Fairway, the developer who ended up developing Interlocking, lived in that house right before you come down to hit the property we call Interlocking, Randall Mill Estates, right there by where the phone boxes are and everything. That was the developer of that area, the original developer, he and another guy. Fairway, yeah. Yeah. And so anyway, that whole area started developing, but again, for whatever reason, the family didn't sell off this property until late in the game. Why, I don't know. I've never had a chance to find out any information from anybody. People that talk about the history. Arlington has many interesting history. You know, where the Baptist College is now, first was the gambling hall and whatever else vice you wanted. We had horse racing.
Get out when the police were coming.
But anyway, this area of North Arlington has a lot of history. We're a part of it, and I'm glad that this group is trying to maintain the parks, because many of the parks have either become less than desirable, or they've become very modern with lots of concrete and plastic playground equipment and what have you. So, yes, sir.
This past year, on 4th of July, there was some certain gratitude, big amounts of trash, plastics, all alongside the Trinity, down there by the, where they let people rack off and go through the Trinity.
Yeah.
Now, what you're talking about with the fireworks here in this park and how
Right over
everybody
there
was parking, well, now it's all being pushed off into the Trinity, pushed off into the Fort Worth Water Department. And I think that's a big issue about people celebrating Fort Worth
Well, Arlington has its own fireworks today, downtown. And then, of course, Six Flags has their fireworks, and the Rangers have their own fireworks. So you can get your fireworks.
But what worries me is the fireworks that go off in Randall Mill Park, and they are big
Today.
Well, my main concern was the plastics in the Trinity River.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is on the 4th of July, they shoot off over here, and they're not supposed to. Some really big fireworks, and they're scary.
All right. If you want any more information, it's very different. If you go over toward the playground, go to the right over there, there's a walkway, you'll see a metal plaque. Here's a picture of it. It talks about Randall Mill Park. And that description in there tells you a lot of the history of the park. So if you want or remember any of the stuff, you can, of course, get that. Just because sometimes people want, and in fact, I was able to get back when 1941 became 1943, and Burge Fort moved to the banks of the Trinity in what we call Fort Worth. Here was the original picture of Fort Worth in 1843. Here was a picture of Fort Worth in 1873. So it's the only pictures I've ever found of the original fort.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Okay, I'm talking about this road right here, right here,
Uh-huh.
not Oakwood, but this one in the park. And it goes all the way down, and it used to go around the north side of the pond down there. And then it would connect to this one, right?
No,
No,
this never went, it stopped right here.
Yeah, it
There
never
was never a
connected.
road past here.
It
The
never
road came
connected.
around the north side of the lake and came up the hill to a parking lot that used to be down there. It's no more.
And it had a cement
Yeah, it had a
pad
pavilion.
of tables and stuff, but it never connected.
These two never connected.
Nope.
Well, then what's down there north? Where did that, is that this one that went down there?
Yeah, and it just looped around and landed at a little pad like this with
Okay,
picnic
so there
tables.
was like this half pod, this street ended, and then that one ended, so in between
Right.
was vacant land, sort of like.
it is
Yes,
now.
basically what you have right now.
Wow, look at that.
Well, you know what the concrete pads are up there in the landscape?
Yeah.
That was a picnic area.
That's
There used to be a parking lot there where the wildflowers are, and you can still see the curb on it. That's where the parking
Yep.
lot was.
Oh, is that what those turds are? I thought that was part of the street.
Now it's a parking lot.
Oh, that.
People would come around there and park and walk down the steps or pathway down to the bridge in Randall Mill Park, pond. So,
Well, why did they do away with that, the north end of the pond down there? The pond was always here, right?
Yeah.
there is some history of Arlington, Randall Mill Park that was not the best from that standpoint. Arlington had a problem during the 70s and early 80s with groups coming in here and using the park for various purposes not family related. That parking area you talked about was one of them from that standpoint. The other thing was, used to be down here, the restroom on this side. They almost put in a total curfew in Arlington because of Randall Mill Park.
Was that the problem, the gate?
That was one of the issues. Of course, that's, if you know the street down here with the G, originally was not the name, it had a different name when it first opened. It was Gaywood.
Yeah, Gaywood was, we changed it because the gate was from.
That was a story, but it never.
But that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
Another
era.
Yeah.
But, so, yes. But as far as that other area on that area down there is about as far away as primarily young people could get and do things, and so they closed it off.
Okay. So the pond was always there?
Always there, yeah.
Was it bigger or smaller than what it is now, or?
Well, it was changed when they put in the turnpike, as they called it, I-30, when it's a toll road, when they put that through there. Because remember, part of the park is north of I-30. So when they took that, the pond that was there, when they put the dam, if you want to call it, the roadway of I-30, it basically reduced the pond a little bit.
But there were so many ducks on the pond, and we would come down with our son and our basset hound and walk down there and wake the ducks up. Our son loved to wake the ducks up. Feed them, and when it gets bitter cold and they haven't been fed in a long time, if you come over with some bread, they will come at you. They want something.
Well, anyway, I'd be happy to, if people want any other information. Yes, sir.
Back in the early 80s, when the pond froze over, is that about the only time you can recall the pond froze over?
I think I can remember 2 times. Yeah.
I know our kids ice skated over there on the pond.
Yeah, they,
Oh, really? Oh.
yeah, it's,
That was that bitter, bitter cold.
yeah, we bitter cold before the bitter cold was last year.
It's part,
There's a little cemetery across if you go past the interlock, the other side of the creek. It's probably has a lot, city lot size. But do you know who's buried there and how that came about?
That's the original Harrison Cemetery.
then on Meadowbrook and,
Yeah, the old Meadowbrook Road in there, it goes by
Yeah.
those big houses, yeah.
Was that a church cemetery?
No, a private family cemetery.
Oh, okay.
To my knowledge, is all was ever buried in there.
every now and then somebody organizes a group to go over and clean that up because
Yeah,
it's
it's
a long
been
week.
cleaned up later.
One thing that oral history for Arlington, in other words, there's nothing factual that reports this, but oral history said that the buffalo would drink water down at Marabone Springs. You know where that is, down on Collins and 303, that area? And the buffalo would come up center and get Randall Mill, curve around, and get down to the Trinity. And that Randall Mill, in that part, was originally a buffalo trail.
Yeah, like I say, it was important to realize to support that many Indians in the Village Creek area. There was abundant, because agrarian, they grew crops because the land worked so well down there in that bottom land, but also there was a lot of animals in there. So, I mean, you know, we have everything. I mean, I have a very good friend who saw an alligator in the Trinity, for example. So, you know, it's you know, so people talk about bobcats and coyotes and what have you, and yeah, we have those. That if you get down to the banks of the Trinity, one of these days when that land along Green Oaks and the bottomland going over to Bell Helicopter is developed, we may get animals coming out all after us from that standpoint.
Okay, so, regarding the land that's right over here where the, Kelly, the double benches are right there, and it says Wildscape. Okay, that's where this parking lot is that y'all were saying had the picnic tables.
If you gotta come south, to the, about, I don't know, 200 or 300 feet where that parking lot was. It's kind of that level area. There's still not any trees in there.
Right.
That's where the parking lot was.
Okay, so that land, the only thing that's really like scalped the land there or scarred the land is that parking lot, is that right?
Correct.
And the benches and the picnic tables.
Right.
So would you say that the vegetation that's growing there now is the same kind of vegetation that was here when the Caddo Indians were here?
Well, we planted wildflowers over there one day, didn't we, Margie? We planted about $50 worth of wildflower seeds over there one day.
The city planted landscape that was indigenous to Texas, what I was told. Now, whether it was there when the Indians were here, I couldn't tell you.
Okay, so the city has put in some grasses and individuals throughout the year thrown seeds out there.
People have tried for years to grow bluebonnets in here, but, you know, we don't have the right land, you know. It's red clay that we're on.
Just few. We don't have water going to where it would be helpful.
There's a Indian marker tree in the oaks above Interlochen, and it points towards downtown. And we were trying to figure out why the Indians would mark it to go to point to downtown. Would it be that there was a spring with downtown, or was it the crystal, or was it?
Well, now the Indians, of course, there was two primary tribes in here, the Caddo and the Cherokee, but there were 7 total different tribes in this North Texas area. And for those of you who've been around a while, know in Grand Prairie, that name Grand Prairie has a reason, there's something called Trader's Village.
Oh, yeah.
Well, before everybody else took their garage sale stuff there, back in the early 1800s, the 7 Indian tribes would go to that area themselves on a designated full moon or whatever, and they would all take different things and trade with each other before any settlers were in this area.
Was one of the tribes Choctaw?
Yes.
Okay. Is that naming rights for Globe Park has been changed to Choctaw, so it's going to be like Choctaw Park, where the old stadium, baseball stadium is now.
Didn't they have, for years, didn't they have cowbells down there at Trader's Village?
Oh, yes, yes.
Do they still do that? I mean,
I have not seen that, but I know that they still have dance contests down there.
Okay.
You know.
When we moved in here, we moved in 1976, and my son was just 3 months old. And that year was bicentennial. So I always tell people, you know, that one of the great, remember those ads on TV when they would say, they'd give us a history of the United States, and they would say great moments in American history, a bicentennial moment. Do you remember those? Bicentennial. So I always tell people that when we moved in here, it was a bicentennial moment. Of course, now a lot of people are like, what's that?
Well, kids used to fish down there at the pond a lot.
Fishing's allowed, but they don't fish as much as they used to. So.
Yeah, they used to fish, ride their bike.
They do have a big powwow at UTA every year when the Indian tribes come together. It's a big gathering.
Yeah, I just haven't heard anything about it in a long time. Maybe I'm oblivious to what goes on around me.
Yes, ma'am.
The trees that are around here,
Most of them are post oaks. Yes, most of them are here.
He's gonna be 16
and then
next
so they were little.
The city tried to plant some pine trees in the park,
Taking all his tips.
and I think all of them have since either struck by lightning or died or something. But there was a period of time, especially on past here, where the city tried to plant a bunch of slash pines. But I don't think any of them have survived.
Do you have any pictures of the park in your personal stuff of the park itself?
Probably pictures with lots of snow. I always went over here and took pictures in the snow.
Yeah.
Trying to lay off
At
that.
that time, we were taking slides, so they're all on slides. But yeah, it was beautiful when there was some pretty snow to walk over here.
So when you first moved here, speaking of the trees again, this was pretty much just level. I mean, there wasn't hardly any trees, right? And then these have been planted.
No,
Oh,
most
no,
of
it was
them.
all trees.
These are all, these post oaks have been here for, you know,
They're part of the cross timbers.
They're
Yeah.
probably about 150 to 200 years old.
yeah.
Okay, but they were all little. Was there
No,
any big trees?
no, they were
They were
here.
already big.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was one thing that was so great. It was not just a park, but you got out, you walked down through all the trees, and it was more than a park. You know, you really feel like you got away.
And then over the years, the other trees came in, the other oaks came in.
Yeah, they dropped and, you know, got acorns or whatever and, you know, became bigger trees, you know. And there've been different trees. I mean, we used to have a very large oak tree right here, probably 12, 15 feet from the pavilion that was struck by lightning and destroyed. I don't know how many years ago it was,
But
but
we watched it catch on fire.
yeah, went up in flames. We watched it from our house.
How old is an oak tree by your house?
The best guesstimate we can find out is it's 150 to 200 years old.
Big oak tree.
The storm that we had that was so bad in that October tore up a lot of it, and we didn't even know if we were going to be able to save it. But they came in and really did
We had an arborist
a
work for
good
the whole crew, and
job on it, you know. So
One of the people from UTA told me that a pine tree has roots going out from it as long as the pine tree is tall. And that's why you don't want pine trees in residential areas, because they go under houses, the roots do, go under houses and suck up moisture under your house, and that's what causes some of the slab problems. So you don't want pine trees, and you don't want, is it mulberry trees and willow trees?
willow trees especially.
Yeah, their root system is too wide.
How about the ponds? Are they, no ponds here in your house?
They go straight down.
They go straight down.